color palette is great. Yeah.
It's nice to know you're still doing something at the high school.
Yeah, well, yeah, most of it's like student driven.
Well, that's good.
Corey, so on the script, we have Colt still in the regular spot, so I'm just going to, at that point, say,
Yeah.
we're going to.
We've lost it. We'll take it. Actually, on this side is that.
Lovely.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, my student
Hey, Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata. Hey, I do not have a copy of the script yet, so I didn't know if I just wanted to check in. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. I'll go ahead. I sent it a little bit earlier today. Let me try to make sure that I got you on that, and I didn't send it to a different Jennifer.
I may have missed it from today. Yeah, so I checked. Yeah, so you sent it this morning. Okay, let me check for this morning. I apologize.
No, it's completely fine.
I got it. Thank you so much.
Great.
One second, I'm almost there.
So it sounds like the stream might have audio right now.
That's weird because I'm muted. Here, I'll just turn.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, and welcome to this regular meeting of the State Board of Education. This morning I was thinking to myself, our meetings are such a formal occasion, and we deal with some very serious topics and issues. And often I forget to slow down and just consider the humanity of people in the room and online as well. And so today I'm going to try to remind myself to slow down and maybe provide more context and explanation when that seems like it is necessary. So thank you so much for your patience. And Corey, we will start with the roll call this morning. Would you do that for us, please?
Happy to, Chair. Student Advisor Emily Zoe.
Here.
Student Advisor Caroline Gao.
Here.
Teacher Advisor Mona Khalil.
Here.
Ryan Mann on behalf of Treasurer Reed.
Here.
Emily McLean on behalf of Secretary Fagan.
Here.
Director George Russell.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Bridget Wheeler.
Here.
Vice Chair Jennifer Skurlock.
Here.
Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata.
Here.
And ODE Director Colt Gill.
I'm here, and Chair, I apologize. I will be in and out several times today because of legislator and governor's office meetings.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Corey, for doing that. And seriously, every little moving part of this meeting takes so much thinking, so much forethought, and so I appreciate everything that everyone continues. Corey has a million things going on at the same time, and I have a great deal of admiration and appreciation every meeting for that, Corey. So thank you for making these meetings possible for us. Okay, well, we will begin with our board member reports. And as a reminder, the board member reports are an opportunity to share events, thoughts, and feelings with each other and with the public. Each director speaks on their own behalf and shares their own perspectives. And so this morning, as per usual, we will follow the order that we normally do. We do have a few folks who may be excused from the meeting this morning and will not be in attendance. And I will note that when we get to that point. But let's start with our student advisors, because this is the best part of the meeting, every month during our meetings. So let's start with student advisor Emily Zoe.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata. Today I wanted to talk about lockdowns and lockdown drills in schools. This past week we had a lockdown at Lake Oswego High School, where I attend classes occasionally. And although it was eventually seen as a false alarm, there was something with the external communications, it just brought up a lot of conversation in my class that I sort of wanted to share. So this high school has gone into lockdown, I think, 6 or 7 times in the past year or two, all for like various reasons, some being false alarms and some being genuine threats. But I think that it's really important to highlight the amount of anxiety that these lockdowns and lockdown drills can cause for students, especially those who have previous experiences with gun violence, and seeing sort of these stories all across the news every single day can cause a lot of anxiety for students who are showing up to school, when ultimately school is supposed to be a place that students feel comfortable and safe to learn. And so and it can also cause a lot of anxiety with parents, especially when there isn't communication between the school and the parents, and they're sort of getting text messages from their students about going into lockdown without really understanding what's completely going on. And so I think it's really important when we're looking at this sort of issue of school safety to ensure that we're also caring about a student's mental well-being, caring about any previous experiences that they have in order not to trigger them or their anxiety. So for example, something that our school has implemented that I think is really great is whenever there is a scheduled lockdown drill, there is an alternate room where students can go to where they don't have to, have the door like knocked on by the police officer or anything like that. Instead, they sort of are they can opt into this separate room where they're given like sort of like an informational slideshow about what to do if there is a lockdown drill, but without that sort of added anxiety. And I think that this alternate can be expanded to include not only the students who opt in, because although I understand that it's very important to protect students and to make sure that we're prepared, I think that the added trauma and stress and anxiety of doing a lockdown drill can be a real concern for a lot of students. Mm-hmm. And so as we move forward, I just urge a lot of schools across the state as well as the state board to keep in mind sort of students' mental well-being when looking at this sort of issue of school safety.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for such a thoughtful report and on on the heels of some recent school violence in the in the country, it is such an important thing to consider in so many angles. So thank you very much for your comments. And Student Advisor Caroline Gao.
Thank you, Chair Tina Zapata. I also did want to bring up today, mainly I wanted to talk a little bit also about gun violence and safety in schools, as well as digital equity. And of course, we have recently had and always had a lot of pretty traumatizing events in terms of violence on school campuses. And I think for every educator and for every adult and for every person, it's important to remember the individual students who are being impacted by this. And whether it's in an elementary school or in a college, when we see our peers being injured or being killed in the schools where they're supposed to be safe, where they're supposed to be nurtured for a future, that is really painful. And it's really painful to think that maybe our future will be jeopardized by violence from other people, and that maybe the future that we've planned for ourselves and the colleges that we've worked so hard to get into, to think that something as senseless as gun violence, something as preventable from so many perspectives as gun violence, could end that path is really scary for a lot of students. And the fact that so many of us have to go to school each day and try to learn when we don't know if we can even go home that day is really scary, and it's not something that any child, that any person should have to go through. And of course we have limited authority on gun safety legislation on the state board, but I think it always is good to keep in mind the importance of protecting our students from every perspective, physically, mentally, and creating schools where we feel safe to learn and we feel supported to learn and we don't feel afraid for our lives. So I just wanted to uplift that, as it's something that's been on the mind of me and a lot of my peers in Oregon and across the nation. And another note that I just wanted to bring up was digital equity and the importance of every student having access to technology for educational purposes, and also just for learning future skills, whether that's learning how to use a keyboard on a computer, whether that's homework that's being submitted on Canvas now. Every student needs access really to technology, to broadband, to be able to function in school today. And I know at our district we've basically given every student access to a Chromebook, which has really supported that mission of making sure every student can just participate fully in school regardless of what their technology situation at home might be like. But that is, again, the importance of that in every school is something I wanted to uplift, as well as with ChatGPT, the rise of AI, chatbots that are more advanced than ever before. It's also important to realize the inequities that this could create, whether that's with college essays and academic dishonesty and people who have access to newer technologies having unfair advantages. I think it's really important that educators are kept up to date on these new technologies and how they can control for their potential impact in the classroom.
Yes. Thank you so much for, again, the highlight of my day are the reports that you student advisors bring to the table. I couldn't agree more. Every student deserves to be in a safe educational environment. And while we have limitations as a body, we also have a lot of possibilities. And I appreciate the awareness that you bring, that your voice as students brings to us, because a healthy and fair environment, learning environment, is not just about the treatment that comes from other students, from teachers, from administrators. It is also about feeling safe in school. Thank you. Thank you so much. And also about the AI and the disparities that can create, potentially will create. So I really appreciate all of your words. Being in the trenches and on the ground is so such a valuable contribution to the board. Teacher Advisor Mona Khalil.
Thank you, Chair Zapata. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And thanks for listening every month. Today I'd like to share my experience at the Capitol last Wednesday, testifying about House Bill 2656, Elevate Student Voice Act. I was able to give my educator perspective and I'm proud to support this bill. State assessments are important. We all know that. You know, we want to know their reading, writing, math, and attendance data. But they're only a small glimpse into a child's education. Including students and valuing their input and opinions creates an environment where children feel appreciated and welcome. Every person has a unique story to tell, backgrounds, cultures, languages, religions, genders, perspectives, and opinions, and I could go on and on and on. We'll give the district schools and teachers the opportunity to educate the whole child. We measure and assess what we value, and if we value what students are experiencing in schools, we must ensure that every school district across all corners of the state, they're utilizing the tools at hand, like the Student Educational Equity Survey and the Student Health Survey, to better understand and support how students are doing in schools. These surveys ask critical questions that help educators and everyone in the state better target resources and support where it's needed the most. What we know about learning is that when students feel safe, and going along with what our student advisors just mentioned, we need to know how they feel. Do they feel safe? Are they healthy? Do they have a connection to their community and have their basic needs met? We see these are the essential building blocks to then learn. You can't learn when you're hungry, afraid, or don't feel a sense of belonging. These surveys help us see with an insightful eye into things like student mental health and conditions for learning. They ask about whether students have access to tools that help connect them with teachers, again, going along with the technology and, you know, making sure that we're listening to those needs. Whether they have access to a full-rounded education, such as play, art, or music. And they ask about whether students have a trusted adult either in or outside of school. These are critical questions to understanding student experiences and how those voices connect to what is and is not working in our schools. We need to elevate the student voice and include students in the learning process. Their feelings, thoughts, experiences, and health play a major role in their education and success. That's what I have to share today, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Teacher Advisor Khalil. Yeah, yes to all. I'm just echoing everything that everyone is saying this morning. Thank you so much for your perspective. And we have School Board Advisor Lily Gomez. Also, I believe Lily is on the call.
Chair, Lily is hoping to join pretty soon.
Okay. All right. We will move forward, and I will advise that Superintendent Advisor Paul Coakley is excused this morning. So we will continue with Ryan Mann on behalf of Treasurer Reed.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Just two updates from the Treasurer's Office this morning. One is you may have seen a press release in the last week or so about the Common School Fund distribution this year. The fund, which is overseen by the State Land Board and invested by the State Treasurer's Office, it's grown to $2.1 billion now, and it's exciting because this year the fund will distribute a record $72.2 million to schools. It's a fund that's managed for intergenerational equity. It's supported Oregon schools since statehood, so it has to keep growing while also making distributions, and it's encouraging that it's grown despite sort of uneven markets and is making that record distribution this year. So just want to make sure folks had heard that news. And then the other news, just a couple days ago, the Treasurer released the first ever Oregon Financial Wellness Scorecard. It's really a collection of many different data points all in one place so that we can get a snapshot of the financial wellness of Oregonians across the state. I will just share a couple quick takeaways from the report. First, the good news, and that's that Oregonians are collectively earning more, have rising net worth, and the gender income gap is improving. However, the Oregon's financial well-being is uneven. Those living in rural areas, people of color are likely to earn less, face higher levels of poverty, and experience more financial stress than their peers across the state, despite healthier economic trends. Additionally, Oregonians were less likely to answer financial knowledge questions correctly in 2021 than they were in 2018, and say that they are less confident about making important financial decisions. So there's clearly work to be done to make more progress for individual Oregonians' financial wellness. To that end, one piece of the effort is the Treasurer's Financial Empowerment Advisory Team that's been meeting quarterly the last couple of years. That's where this report came from. They'll meet again next week on February 22nd, and we'll hear specifically from legislators regarding various proposals to add more financial education, both to the K-12 curriculum and at other stages in the lives of Oregonians. So the group isn't necessarily advocating for one of any particular policy proposal themselves, but is supporting some additional efforts to add financial education, both for kids and throughout the lifespan, so that we can make progress and improve financial wellness for Oregonians across the state. So those were the two reports. Happy to answer any questions or provide more information on either of those, but that's all I had this morning.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's always good to hear about the status of money and finances. And it's exciting when it's a positive report, so very much appreciated. And I'm sure we will follow up with any questions directly with you if anybody has any. Okay, so I see that our school board advisor, Lily Gomez, is now on the call, so we'll go back and invite Lily to share her report.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning to everyone. Yes, I'm able to just log on now. So my report right now is one of the most important tasks that a school board member takes on, which is evaluating the superintendent. So that is the process that we are going through right now. It's been extended a bit because we're trying a new approach to get more of an in-depth, deeper look into the school district. So we've been meeting with cabinet teams, leadership teams, admin teams, so principals and groups made up by sort of kind of PLC members. So this is one new for me. I mean, I was just appointed in October, so to begin with, I mean, this is just a new process for me. And in addition to that, our board has just tried to come up with a new process, even different from last year. So it's been interesting in how to evaluate, our superintendent. Also because this is not evaluating her on this current school year. This goes back to the previous school year with previous board members. So it's been a really interesting process for me. I'm learning a lot, and I think it's really giving us great insight into our district and things that are going well and things that definitely need to be improved, that sometimes maybe the superintendent loses sight on that because the superintendent manages so many things. And another thing to mention is application process for board members has opened up. So, it's four seats on our board that would be up for re-elections, and mine included. So that's something that I will be following up and will be doing by that deadline. I've been starting to have conversations and excited to be part of that process again. And just a lot of learning, and thank you for having me again. I'm just excited to learn and soak all the information on the state level as well, and how I can bring that back to my board and other board members in my community here out in Eastern Oregon. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Did I? I hear some echo, but I think I'm good now. Thank you so much for that report, School Board Advisor Gomez. I think, first and foremost, I really hope that your campaign is successful this spring, and so really hoping for the best in that regard. Also, I really appreciate the perspective that you've brought or shared with regard to the evaluation of the superintendent and the importance of a school board's role in the district. There is so much power and voice that the school board brings to a district, and so very appreciative of the reminder to all of us of how important those roles are. So thank you. And next is Emily McLean on behalf of Secretary Fagan's office. Secretary of State office.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. Emily McLean on behalf of Secretary of State Shemia Fagan. Thank you so much, Chair Martinez Zapata, for the opportunity to share a few words today. We are very focused on the legislative session and implementing our 2023 goals here at the Secretary of State's office. I want to thank Ryan for his update on the Common School Fund and just echo that. Like a colleague of mine said, it's an example in terms of this record investment in the Common School Fund of how both financial and environmental stewardship can go to benefit Oregon schools. So I thank him for that update. And we just celebrated, as I heard some of my colleagues earlier today talking about Valentine's Day. We celebrated that, but that is also Oregon's birthday. So at the Oregon Secretary of State, we celebrated Oregon's 164th birthday this week by releasing the new covers to the Oregon Blue Book. And my colleagues here have heard me talk about the Blue Book before. It's a project that we're really proud of because it's really Oregon's almanac. And so I wanted to just share that it is such a great resource for Oregonians. I know that educators and students engage with this book because it does hold so much information about state agencies, about how our government works, and it also highlights incredible things from Oregonians. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a plug that we celebrated by releasing the front cover from an Oregonian named Micah Lundstedt in Eugene, and it's titled Morning Magnificence. Micah made the stunning image at sunrise on the Oregon side of the Columbia River Gorge at Rowena Crest. And then when you see the back cover, it is from Dale George, a retired mechanic who lives in Grants Pass. And Dale's beautiful image of 3 colorful rockfish was made at the Oregon Coast Aquarium and is titled The Master's Voice. So I just wanted to share that. It's available for sale now, and we'll continue releasing it. And I'm excited. Hopefully soon you'll hear about some of the announcements of the student essays that were chosen for this year's Blue Book. So when that's available, we'll make sure that you get to hear about that as well. I also wanted to comment on audits, which is a big role that the Secretary plays, and Secretary Fagan will be releasing her 2023-24 audit plan soon, and I'll go over that in a future meeting. And I wanted to comment that Governor Kotek has placed a real emphasis on agencies around the state implementing audit recommendations, and our auditors and our secretary and our whole team are looking forward to supporting that work, including supporting the Oregon Department of Education and this board in that work. And I can't help but comment on the excellent updates from our 2 student advisors. I just wanted to acknowledge the shootings that happened in Michigan and thank both Emily and Caroline for your really good comments. I bring that up in the audit section because the secretary did announce her intention to examine Oregon's red flag law, which is also known in other languages extreme risk laws when it comes to firearms in our country. So that will be a part of our audit plan moving forward. And so I just wanted to recognize the good comments made by the students and your thoughtfulness around that, and say that our audit plan will be looking at those red flag laws. And then also I did want to just say that we just released in January an audit on broadband in Oregon, also to Emily's comments. So I hope that folks will look at the audit that we released. It was just on January 11th, I believe. And similarly, Secretary Fagan shared that we have a real once-in-a-generation opportunity with federal investments in broadband that are happening in the state. And she shared really similar sentiment that I just wanted to note, that really broadband means access to affordable, high-speed internet that kids, adults, everyone across our country rely on, and folks cannot be successful, whether it's in school or work or serving customers in a business, without good access and equitable access. So I just couldn't help but share, but comment on relevant audits that our team works on, and thank the students for their good remarks. And then the last thing I wanted to share is that the Oregon Kid Governor, Leah, has been very busy. She met with Governor Brown before she left office. She's already met with her mayor and the Sherwood City Council, who recognized her in their recent meeting, and she's meeting with her local legislators as well. And I wanted to say that we've worked with Corey, and she's planning to come join the state board in March. So she will be providing the Secretary of State update and board update in March, and I know she's looking forward to that. That's what I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I so look forward to that. I am really, really looking forward to the Kid Governor joining us. And so many important things that you've shared with us, Emily. One, I also want to say how much the Blue Book, resonates with me, because as a high school student, I remember our government teacher, my government teacher, making use of that to instill and support, one, submitting essays, and two, just having it as the almanac of knowledge and background for the state of Oregon. So it just I was flooded with memories of high school when you were talking about that. Thank you so much for all of that. I also thank you and make a call for that coalescing of efforts on gun control, and I'll speak a little bit more about that during my report. So I appreciate your words and your comments, Emily, on behalf of Secretary of State Fagan. And we'll move to Director George Russell.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata. Just a couple of quick things. First, I want to acknowledge and recognize all the educators, both elementary through actually university, who in recognition of African American History Month have projects and events that are going on, some of which I've had the opportunity to attend in our local community, but I know that statewide educators, school districts, community colleges and universities are taking on activities, and students are being well engaged around African American history. So some appreciation to those folks who are doing that, and just to acknowledge that this is African American History Month. And then secondly, just real quickly, want to acknowledge and commend our director, Colt Gill, for the award that he received at the COSA Salishan Conference. Unfortunately, I was unable to make it and be there to support him in, in person, but did get a lot of feedback about it, and so much want to congratulate him, and hope that in his report he will make some mention of that and tell us a little bit more what it was about. I know that they plan to have it extended as an award every year, recognizing outstanding superintendents and educators into the future. So I just want to say, to raise my hand and say respect to Director Colt Gill, and thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Director Russell. I had the fortune and privilege of being present during that portion of the COSA conference, and it was phenomenal, and also testament to the work that Director Gill has done to have such a prestigious now award named after him. Henceforth, it will be known as the Colt Gill Award for recognizing outstanding superintendents. So I'm very proud to work side by side with Colt in that. Thank you for sharing that, Director Russell. And I'm not sure if we have Director Gustavo Morales on the call this morning.
Not yet, Chair.
Okay, we will try to come back and see if Director Morales is able to join us a little bit later. And similarly, Director Shimiko Montgomery is also has a commitment this morning and may be coming back. We'll see if she is able to join us before the end of reports. Director Kimberly Howard Wade is excused from the meeting this morning, so we will proceed with Second Vice Chair Bridget Wheeler and her report.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata. Is my audio okay? Can you hear me okay? I have a new laptop, so I'm still trying to figure that out. Great, thank you. Well, good morning. Again, always an honor to be a member of the board and spend this day with everybody that is so passionate about our students, our teachers, and the work that we need to do in Oregon. I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to talk about the one thing that my two boys bring to my attention every morning on every board day. Every time I have a board meeting, they always say, "Mom, remember to talk about the importance of PE and recess." And also the ability, it ties into the ability to stand and move in school. So it's a bit broader, but they are very passionate about that. So I'd like to offer attention and a reminder to the importance of movement and energy outlets in classrooms and in educational settings. I'm not saying anything that teachers do not already know about, but I want to continuously bring light to youth mental and psychological experiences in schools so that we can support their success. We all know that movement leads to better cognitive performance and academic success, but more importantly, it leads to less behavioral and discipline issues. We have youth that have been on lockdown in rural and urban areas during the period of time that we were trying to save each other's lives. They're coming to school with over a year of little movement and minimal activity in which they need some release, amongst the many other issues that they've been up against. Non-traditional enhancements to learning, more than just movement, is also critical. I know teachers are being creative if they are given the opportunity and freedom to do so, but I hope that instead of those teachers being known as groundbreakers or the crazy new teacher down the hall, that this becomes normal in the classroom. Sound and smell and touch and lighting and movement can be so critical to ease stress, to connect youth with their talents, retain material, and create a true experience. So I hope that we can always continue to support those things in our learning environments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Second Vice Chair Wheeler. Isn't it wonderful to hear the voice of our children, our kids? I love it, and such wisdom, right? I wish they would just stay like that forever and ever. Thank you so much for sharing, and appreciate and send those kiddos a big hug for their reminder. We will move forward with Vice Chair Jennifer Skurlock for her report.
Thank you so much, Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see all of you. I'm just so overjoyed today. So please forgive me if I'm exuding a sense of excitement. First of all, happy Black History Month. Such an honor to celebrate, to stand on the shoulders of my mother and my father. Happy Valentine's Day. I even got a musical telegram or musical, what do? They come around and do the little, like a sing-along sort of thing. And I was honored yesterday by 2 students. It was the cutest thing. So it was just adorable. So loving Valentine's Day. I also want to mention Rare Disease Month, and so one of my students did share that, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And then last but not least, congratulating Colt Gill for his amazing work, and I'm so glad that you were honored by COSA and by everyone, because it's well deserved. I have to give a shout out real quick to Emily and Caroline. You two inspire me. I just love hearing your reports and just hearing student perspective. I love it. So thank you so much for doing that. I just wanted to share a couple of things. My students have just finished reading Othello, which they loved, and they really got into it and acting. We went in depth around talking about race and the impact of race and the impact that it had on Othello and Desdemona, and students are really engaged in those courageous conversations, which is fantastic. They're also learning about satire, and they just watched the movie Jojo Rabbit and Don't Look Up, and they were analyzing that as text. And it's great because I asked students to share some of the movies they would like to watch, and we analyze them as text. And so it was student input, and they really enjoyed the two films to understand the depth of satire and how it works. But I wanted to highlight something specific. Last Thursday, I was on Capitol Hill. I was in Washington, D.C. For the NEA board meeting, and we have our NEA lobby day. And whenever I go to Washington, D.C., I always bring student stories with me, and also member stories. So I had over 60 letters and stories that were written by educators, but in this case, over 90% of the stories were from my students. And I wanted to highlight a specific story, and again, I apologize if I get teary-eyed or anything like that. My student, her name is Autumn. And this is what Autumn said, and this is what I want to share with you around the importance of taking care of the whole child. That it's not just what happens in the classroom, but what happens outside of the classroom that impacts a child's learning. And this is what she said. My name is Autumn Garber. I'm an 11th grade student at Churchill High School in Eugene, Oregon. I'm writing this letter to voice my concerns about homelessness in the state of Oregon, and ask that you do whatever you can to help this issue that is plaguing not only Eugene, but the country as a whole. Most of my life, I was homeless, specifically when I was in elementary school. This is an important period of a child's life for physical and emotional development, and being homeless during this time greatly affected this for me. My grades and mental health suffered dramatically, and it ended up turning into a long-term struggle. School felt exhausting, and I didn't have a safe and reliable place to return afterwards. According to covenanthouse.org, at least 700,000 adolescents ages 13 to 17 experience a form of homelessness. According to endhomelessness.org, children and families make up 30% of the homeless population. I was a victim to these numbers. I was a victim to the statistics on TV and the news when talking about teen homelessness and rates of mental health declining in the homeless population. It is getting more and more expensive to live by the day. It's getting even more expensive to find mental, physical, or emotional help. Homelessness is not only a crisis involving people without homes, it is a crisis involving drug addiction, suicide rates rising, graduation rates declining. According to NHCHC.org in a study during 2017, they found that more than 40% of homeless teens struggle with depression, which is 12% higher than non-homeless teenagers. I would love to live to see not only the percentage of homeless families decline, but the rate of suicides, depression, and drug abuse decline as well in the homeless population. Thank you for uplifting the voices of students in your work. I appreciate your work and advocacy for public education. I have over 60 stories from our precious kids that need to be heard. And I just want to encourage us as a board in the work that we do. When we uplift student voice, we not only change communities, but we change the lives of individual students. And when they're heard, it inspires something beyond what I can teach in my classroom as far as literature. When they know that they are seen and heard, they come to life. And I hope that as a board, we continue to uplift wraparound services so that all students can be heard and honored and not be ashamed to share their stories in the highest places in our nation. And I just want to thank you for this time and uplifting this precious kiddo, Autumn Garber. Thank you so much.
Well, yes, student stories, even the difficult ones, are terribly invaluable. Thank you Vice Chair Scurlock. It is, in thinking, I was sharing earlier that in thinking about my own report, I've become very emotional because it is also filled with student stories. I really appreciate the humanity that you bring to the conversation every time, Vice Chair Scurlock, in sharing those stories. And it looks like I've already started crying, so I might as well just get into it, right? Buenísimos días, educadores, padres de familia, administradores escolares, políticos, burócratas, a quien fuera que escuche en vivo o la grabación de nuestras reuniones del Consejo Estatal sobre la Educación de Oregón. Buenos días y bienvenidos a todos. En mi mundo perfecto llegarían nuestras palabras y misivas a todo jefe de familia en nuestro estado, a todos y cada uno de ustedes. Quiero entonces dirigirme a los educadores bilingües y o de habla hispana del estado y pedirles que supliquen a los papás o encargados de sus alumnos que también escuchen mínimo los informes de los directores del consejo o más o menos la primera hora de la reunión. Por favor, difundan la sintonía de las reuniones mensuales de este consejo, contando con que el mensaje llegue. Si solo a algunas de nuestras familias, les voy a compartir esto. Son ustedes los mejores aliados de nuestros niños, de sus niños que participan en las escuelas sobre las cuales rigen las leyes educativas del estado de Oregón. Ustedes tienen todos los derechos de exigir que a sus niños se les esté ofreciendo una educación participatoria y equitativa, una educación que ofrezca la oportunidad de mejorar y triunfar, y una educación que respete sus diferencias de idioma, de etnia, de raza, de religión, de sexualidad, de género y de barreras en aprendizaje. Cuando algo no marche bien en el salón de sus niños, ustedes tienen todo el derecho de exigir que se corrija el entorno donde aprenden. Cuando no se ofrezcan programas de educación bilingüe, exijan saber por qué a los directores de las escuelas, a los superintendentes, a los concilios escolares de sus distritos. Y si existen esos programas y se eliminan, también exijan saber por qué. La meta de estos programas, como cualquier otro dentro del ambiente escolar, es facilitar el crecimiento y la adaptación de sus niños. Son sus contribuciones, las de ustedes, las que hacen posible la educación pública del Estado. Tienen ustedes derecho a exigir el bienestar y avance de sus hijos. Tienen también el apoyo general de una Secretaría de Educación que no cesa de buscar y formular la equidad en el ámbito escolar por medio de las reglas y estándares educativos del Estado. Somos muy afortunados de vivir en un estado como Oregón, donde las leyes y nuestro gobierno valoran y respetan la integridad de la educación pública y el bienestar y progreso de todo niño a base de equidad e inclusión. Pero necesitamos también su participación, su voz y su voto cuando este sea posible. So, how about those gains on graduation rates, huh? How about those gains for Oregon? I'm celebrating every win because these days it can be a whole battle to even get a small win. It makes me immensely happy to know that there were more students who were able to proudly claim their high school diploma and broaden the paths of their futures. I had the occasion to visit one of my favorite educators in the world, one of several in my family, a K-3 teacher. She invited me to her classroom and as proud and boldly As a peacock displaying its unfurled feathers, she walked me through every inch of her classroom, explaining the meaning to the behavior charts and the opportunities for self-regulation that they present to the children, arranged on her wall as a scale. The science experiments sprawled all over the floor of the classroom, the smart board where the children can see and measure their learning targets, which she made a point to illustrate, correlate with our state instructional standards. Nothing could have made me prouder. I smiled. Standards, which in the last 4 to 5 years have been intricately scrutinized for equity and inclusion. She later shared how all of the teachers in her grade cluster share and compare the progress of their children. Not something that the school requires, but something they do. With an open mind and a desire to improve. For a seasoned educator, she said, it is the most humbling. We do it because we want our kids to do great. We need more support for this, not for over-assessment of our kids, she concluded. Undoubtedly, many things in our state are working. They are, just like this. And not every part of our educational system is such a well-oiled machine. Not every teacher works with similar ambitions or goals, or without prejudice and blatant discrimination. That needs to be noted and called out as well. And not every teacher has the luxury of spending so many unpaid extra hours collaborating with their peers and taking away from their own families. Many teachers burn out because paying attention to every child, to every single child, is very consuming, and most have to work with an untenable number of students whose needs are by far the most complex any society has ever seen. Many teachers lack district support, and every teacher in our state is undercompensated. My son has a great fortune of being able to shadow the work of providers at a shelter for houseless individuals. The last time he was there, he said the demographic was much younger than in previous weeks. He was particularly concerned about a father and his high school-aged son. The son has health problems exacerbated by their living conditions. And this father was trying in the best and most decisive way he could to try to get his son the help he needs. And he sunk into his seat in his defeat. It was visible in his face and demeanor. With every time his attempts at helping his son were met with more grand barriers. On top of no money, he has no transportation to get his son to the clinic where the additional tests the doctor ordered could be conducted. The way my son talked about this man and his effort to try to help his little boy, it's another humbling experience. Even the way they spoke is a visible product of their condition, Mom, my son said. At times, it was almost like listening to a foreign language, even though they were English speakers. And my son's first thoughts were, excuse me, how is he getting to school? How must the kids at school look at him and treat him when he obviously doesn't have regular access to a shower or clean clothes. They don't know his circumstances. Are they unkind? Are they compassionate? And my first thoughts were, how? How can anyone say that the only thing that the children in our schools need is a rudimentary, basic education? In that moment, I wished I could take this family to one of the many school board members in the state, in my own community, and ask them to tell this family to their face that all they need from our schools and from our educators is reading, writing, and math. That this son must graduate, and to do so must complete repetitive and often unnecessary assessments, and he has to figure out how to do this without bringing any of his life's issues into the school with him. No. Not every student is as fortunate as the increasing number of students claiming their high school diplomas in our state. In fact, as we are all aware, public education is the target of regressive fundamentalists throughout the country and in our state. We will not become the next Florida. In our state, in our Oregon, we need to continue finding ways to best serve our students with well-supported teachers, with applicable and responsive curriculum, and with fewer barriers to students. Fewer barriers, such as less assessment, does not mean less rigor, advancement, or success. Further, in our state, we need to be bold and reject doing business with entities like the College Board, which seek a monetary bottom line versus the teaching of a history that includes the lives and perspectives of Black Americans. I am eager to continue this work to garner the advocacy of Governor Kotek and her staff, and to lean in on collaborations with legislators in our state who understand and share these needs and goals and seek to advance them during the current legislative session. In the wake of yet another fatal and deeply disturbing shooting, President Biden has called on Congress and the country for stricter gun laws. I echo these sentiments. We are beyond hoping that help arrives otherwise. We need to be coalescing as government agencies and ensuring our children are safe in the place where safety is supposed to be guaranteed. Thank you. I really apologize, and maybe not so much for all of the emotion. I thank you for showing up. Those of you who are part of the board, who are advisors, people within the Department of Education who do their very best to make sure that our students are met with equity and inclusion. And with these things in mind, I am also excited to hear more on the items contained on our agenda. But now we will take a short break because I need to wipe my nose and clean my face. So a 5-minute break, and then we will return. Thank you so much. Well, we are, I think, all back, and we will begin on the countdown. And here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Director Gill is currently assisting in some legislative meetings, as he indicated this morning, so we will be shifting his director's report to later this meeting. We will instead move straight to our public comment item. And members of the board, within the public notice for our meetings, we are including a link for members of the public to register to provide direct public comment. For this meeting, we did not receive any registrants. We have received written public comment, which has been uploaded to BoardBook. I think those of you who have contributed, I think it was only one comment in writing that we received. Thank you so much for sending that in. We, like the board member reports, the public comment is invaluable to the board. And so thank you for submitting that. And I encourage everyone, if you haven't done so already, to take a look at that written public comment that was received. We will then move into the consent agenda. As has been our practice, I will call for a motion and a second, and Vice Chair Scurlock will make the motion and for our consent agenda. It will be seconded by second Vice Chair Wheeler, and then Corey will proceed with a roll call after that. So can I get a motion?
I move the items on consent agenda.
I think we got that. The connection seems a little wonky, Vice Chair Scurlock, but I think we got the motion. Can we get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you so much. We have a motion from Vice Chair Scurlock and a second from second Vice Chair Wheeler to move the items on the consent agenda. All those in favor of moving the consent agenda will say aye. All those opposed will say no. And Corey, would you please do the roll call for us?
Director Russell?
Aye.
Director Montgomery?
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler?
Aye.
Vice Chair Scurlock?
Aye.
Chair Martinez Zapata?
Aye. It is so moved. We will now transition to adoptions. And the first item on our adoptions list is, and I think is it the only item on our adoption list? Yes. The first and only item on our adoption list is the community-informed gathering process as kindergarten. OAR 581-022-2130. And we have Sodi Fern from the Office of Research, Assessment, Data, Accountability, and Reporting. I am certain that you all try to make it just difficult to say, isn't it? All of the words in the name of the office. So I'm only going to say it that one time. And then we also have Assistant Superintendent Dan Farley from the Office of Research, Assessment, and I lied. Assessment, Data, Accountability, and Reporting. And I think it is Tina, or who is our...
Chair, I think Dan will introduce our third.
Yes, thank you so much.
Good morning. Chair Martinez Zapata, Vice Chair Scurlock, Second Vice Chair Wheeler, members of the board and advisors. My name is Dan Farley. I am the Assistant Superintendent of, I'll give you a short version, the Office of Radar. That's easier to say. And I'm joined by Sodi Fern, who is our K-2 Balanced Assessment Specialist, as well as our new Director of Assessment, Andrea Lockard. Andrea is coming to us from North Clackamas School District. She was the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And I could go on and on about her qualifications and why we're excited to have her, but we only have 10 minutes, and I also want to make sure that we have enough time for Sodi to share an update with you on our progress on the community-informed information gathering process at kindergarten, which is a new approach to look at how we are informing both early learning care and sector, as well as helping kindergarten teachers and families establish relationships built on assets and funds and knowledge. So with that, I will turn it over to Sudi.
Thank you, Dan. Chair Martinez Zapata, Vice Chair Skurlock, and Second Vice Chair Wheeler, members of the board and advisors. We are here to provide a second reading to the proposed language changes of OAR 581, 22, 21, 30. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the team that has worked with me through this process, both at the Division of Early Learning and Care, as well as members at ODE. So there is an existing administrative rule that governs the assessment process at kindergarten. The department is proposing revisions to this rule that, one, would allow for information collection that will inform state-level decisions about Oregon's early learning and childcare programs, policies, and practices. Two, to support families and students in participating in an assessment process for all students enrolled in kindergarten. Since our September 1st meeting here at State Board, the Early Learning Transition Check-In, or what we call ELTC, team met with our advisory panel, State Board and Early Learning Council leadership, and the Rules Advisory Committee to discuss recommended language changes to this rule. The proposed rule changes will, we think, positively impact students and their families. And we want to highlight the 3 reasons here. The first is that the language was intentionally chosen to frame students and their families in using, and we're using asset-based language and approaches. The proposed language centers equity and anti-racist practices. And the third, the removal of the word assessment. We believe this step will reinforce the new approach that we are taking moving forward. Our team believes shifting to a more culturally responsive method allows for stronger relationships to be built, starting at the beginning of a student's kindergarten experience, K-12 career, as opposed to an assessment that may ultimately serve as a barrier that also has long-term impacts on the connection between school and home. In addition, the proposed language also allows for flexibility to include other future culturally responsive components that are deemed necessary through our engagement process. While I know you have already seen the OAR and the updates, the proposed language in red, we thought it would be beneficial to include the OAR without any strikeouts. So here it is. And I will turn it back over to Dan.
I probably didn't give you all enough time to read through that, but I did want to make sure that we gave you an opportunity to provide any comments or questions or recommendations that you have in relation to the OAR change or the work that Sudi has been leading in partnership with the new office or agency of DELC, the Department of Early Learning and Care.
Thank you all. It's great to meet you, and apologies, Andrea, for not having the name accurately beforehand. Welcome. Thank you for the updates and the presentation. Do we have any questions for Sudi and the team? Yes, teacher advisor Khalil.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata. First, I want to say thank you for this work that you've been doing. I can't stress the importance of building that relationship right away as soon as families and their children enter the school system. And so building those relationships and taking away that assessment, we're not, that judgment piece, I feel like that was just, that's wonderful. We want to get to know you. This is a relationship that we're building with you in our community. So I think that's fabulous. So thank you for the work, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Any questions in the Zoom room or comments? Yes, Vice Chair Scurlock.
Thank you so much, Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata, and thank you so much to the team for your presentation. Again, kind of reiterating what Director Mona had mentioned about the importance of including families and taking out the word assessment and making sure that the focus is around equitable practices and making sure that students are supported, the whole child's being supported as they step into public education. So thank you for your presentation today.
Any other comments or questions? I want to offer again, I won't ever get tired of doing this, of offering my thanks for the work that you do. This step is such an important step. The very first step a child and their family takes into the school system is so key, it's so crucial. And for them to feel like they're not already under fire is so important. So this is a key change, in my opinion, in the work that the state board has been active in trying to put forth. And so I really appreciate this so much, and look forward to ongoing revisions and looking and analyzing with the contributions of community engagement. Thank you all for that. Okay, so being that there are no other comments or questions, can I get a motion?
I apologize. Thank you so much, Chair. Move the board adopt the community-informed information gathering process at kindergarten, OAR 581-022-2130.
Seconded.
Thank you so much. We have a motion from Vice Chair Scurlock and a second from Second Vice Chair Wheeler to adopt the community-informed information gathering process at kindergarten, OAR 581-022-2130. All those in favor will say aye, and all those opposed will say no, and Corey will do the call of the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Director Russell?
Aye.
Director Montgomery?
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler?
Aye.
Vice Chair Scurlock?
Aye.
Chair Martinez Zapata?
Aye. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Okay, and shall we divert a little bit to do our director's report?
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
I think so.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Make sure I can do this, add the slides here, so. See if this works. Okay, it worked, thank you.
Perfect, yes, so
All
just
right.
to clarify, we're moving moving along fluidly along the agenda, and we're coming back to the director's report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and again, I apologize about being in and out of the meeting today. I brought in 5 items to share with you all today. So one is kind of explanation of how we are supporting school districts in their compliance with Division 22 around PE time. It became a challenge, so I'll walk through that. And then a little bit of an update on the legislative session underway, talk a little bit about the governor's recommended budget, an enrollment update, and then the ODE director search. Just a slide on that. Okay. The PE requirements, a few things came together, sort of a confluence of things came together that made it difficult for districts to come into alignment, mostly at the middle school level, sometimes at the elementary level. That had to do with COVID-19 and students who were participating online. It had to do with understanding of two parts of the rule that districts had to come in compliance with as they came back to in-person instruction. And so the team came together, worked with partners to develop a timeline for everybody to come into compliance with Division 22 and hopefully be able to do that while making strong progress and not have state school funds withheld or be out of compliance with Division 22 ultimately. So we adjusted the timeline for this. The standard timeline is that when we find a deficiency that a district has till the beginning of the next school year to fix that and come back into compliance. The department always has the ability to allow an extension of up to another full year. It doesn't have to be that long, but it could be that long. If it determines that the deficiencies can't be corrected during this current school year before the start of the next one. And of course, the consequences are that the deputy superintendent or superintendent of public instruction can withhold portions of the state school fund. And our hope is that districts do come into compliance with this and that they have the funding they need to do that. So there were some inequities in the amount of time that districts had to implement. For the 2020-21 school year, the minutes requirements were waived, but districts were still required to offer PE all year long. That meant that there was a shorter implementation timeline for districts that reported that they were out of compliance with both parts of the rule, even though one part of it was actually waived, rather than just the second part of the minutes. So what we did was, again, go back with partners, refine the directions to districts and try to come up with a plan that put them all on a similar timeline, regardless of what they had previously reported, so that if they're making progress toward compliance with the PE minutes, then they'll be able to meet the deadline, which will be fall of 2025. So this chart shows the context for the different kinds of districts. So there are some that are already in full compliance and don't need any changes. There are some that will get an approved extension and be called conditionally standard, but they do have to show that they have a corrective action plan that's approved by the Department of Education, so we know that they're actually working on it. And then for one more year, if it's needed for some districts, the director will waive the withholding of state school fund. They'll be considered non-standard for that year until they come into standard the next year. We think that this plan will work for most school districts. At middle school, this has been incredibly challenging for school districts because many middle schools in Oregon, in an effort to integrate curriculum and instruction across content areas, have block schedules that don't allow them to, on a weekly, daily basis, meet the PE time requirements as prescribed in the statute. They can do it over the school year sometimes, but they can't do it on the day-by-day, week-by-week basis because students don't necessarily have PE as a full year-long course for that number of minutes. So this means that some schools are having to redesign their entire master schedule. And they still want to maintain the idea that they could integrate. So middle schools that integrate, for example, language arts and social sciences together, and those teachers work together with a cohort of students, they want to be able to continue to do that. So they are really digging in with the staff and trying to make that happen. Again, along the way, there are reports to the Department of Education that they have to share with us what their plan is, what the steps they are taking to come into compliance with the rule. Those have to be approved by the department. We have a PE specialist and our Division 22 specialist, and then our legal team that are all reviewing all of these documents as they come in. They'll have to make the extension requests, and then those will ultimately have to be approved by the director of the agency. And we'll have those same folks, especially our PE specialists, provide technical assistance to districts and sit with them as they are developing their plans. If you want to know even more detail about this, this slide can get you there. There's a link at the top that takes you to more information about this part of Division 22, and then we have this one-pager that we shared with districts that has a deeper explanation of each component so that they understand the process. Okay, that's that topic. I'll go through them and then we can back up and answer questions on any of them. Legislative session, so this is the same slide I've showed the past few months, and I'm just graying out the top as we pass certain deadlines, and then we have more coming up ahead of us. I'll talk a little bit more about the governor's recommended budget that was released the day before this, so on the 31st of January. We have the March revenue forecast coming out next week now. This will be one more signal during the legislative session that tells the legislators exactly how much revenue they will have to budget for in the next biennium. This will inform things like the Ways and Means co-chairs will have a budget framework of some kind, or even perhaps a draft budget that they'll share that everybody will compare to the governor's recommended budget and kind of see what direction both branches of government are trying to lead for, and then they'll work through the session to finalize that. The June revenue forecast comes out on May 17th, and that's the one where you'll start to see the budget bills get actually framed up. Because that'll be the final revenue forecast they'll have before they have to make decisions before the end of session, which constitutionally needs to happen by June 25th, and sometimes happens a week or two before that. The other two big deadlines that we watch for, right now the legislature is very, very active. A lot of bills being processed, a lot of bills being heard, or having work sessions being introduced in some way. But by April 4th, every bill that is going to stay alive needs to be through its first chamber. So if it started in the House, it needs to be through the House and moved over to the Senate. And if it started in the Senate, it needs to be finished there and moved over to the House. There are a couple of ways around that leadership have and legislators have for bills that go to Ways and Means that have a fiscal, some kind of spending attached to them. Rules and revenue bills can stay alive. And then the second chamber deadline is May 19th, so that's again where there's another deadline where many of the thousands of bills that have been introduced begin to fall away. For the bills that we are working on, and that specifically originated at ODE, but typically through community, but then were framed by ODE and introduced. We have the 4 bills at the top that Governor Kotek allowed us to introduce pre-session. So these are all moving through. We have the definition for consent passed through the House committee and passed on the House floor with unanimous support. So this aligns the definition for consent between what is taught in standards to students to what is held as the rule for harassment, sexual harassment in schools. So that way now we're teaching the same thing, which makes sense. The district appointed civil rights coordinator, we're still working on that one. It's had a hearing in the House Education Committee. We're working with partners on a possible amendment, hoping that there will be a work session and it will pass out of committee in the next few weeks. Senate Bill 215, the technical fix bill, was introduced and prior to session shared with many partners, but many partners also, once it was introduced, named some things that they had concerns with. So we've been working with multiple partners. We'll see multiple amendments to this bill, and hopefully again in the next couple of weeks it will make its way through the Senate committee. The grant consolidation work, House Bill 2275, this has been led by our Deputy Director and much by Scott Nine, one of our Assistant Superintendents. That has been making its way through. It passed out of the House Committee yesterday, and so it will be making its way to the floor soon if it hasn't already, and Rep. Hudson will introduce it there. Senate Bill 421 is the Racial Equity and Youth Justice Collaborative. This one is going to actually be introduced by Senator Dembro. We're continuing to meet with the governor's office about how to make this bill the best it can possibly be. A lot of the discussion right now is around student safety and bringing student voice to student safety issues in Oregon. So it aligns with what you both talked about this morning. The governor's interest aligns with that. House Bill is the wrong number. I think it was 3144, if I remember right. The Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian Student Success Plan was introduced by Rep. Wynn yesterday in the House Committee. Had many supporters in the room and got a good hearing. And Governor Kotek is in support of that bill, which means that ODE gets to speak in support of that bill as well. So we're looking forward to that moving its way through. This will codify the student success plan we've created for this student group in statute, and it will also allow for some funds, about $2.5 million, to be granted to community-based organizations and school districts so that they can implement parts of that plan and kind of be proof of concept grants and support students. I'm still working on the Refugee Immigrant Student Success Plan. Governor Kotek is supportive of that. That also has several legislators that are in support of it. School-based mental health infrastructure, ODE is working on that bill and will be introduced in the next couple of weeks as well. Professional learning for ethnic studies and Holocaust and genocide. Governor Kotek will introduce this bill in the next couple of weeks as well. There are other supporters like the chair of the House Education Committee. We had a portion of this bill in the in one of our POPs, our budget recommendations, and it was accepted into the governor's recommended budget, and I'll share that in just a minute. We've been talking with partners and with the governor's office. I think that we'll actually see that number improve so that we can have deeper engagement with educators around making sure they're supported in implementing those standards in classrooms. High school success updates will be introduced by Governor Kotek, and then the school safety and emergency management LCs or bills will be supported again by Governor Kotek. And she is continuing to have her staff review the Secretary of State's systemic risk report and determine how to prioritize, thinking that we can't both fiscally and through staff capacity implement all 13 of those recommendations. So which ones are needed first and can set us up for later success. So I think we'll see that come in a few weeks. This list has not changed much. I think I added one item to it, but we're continuing to see conversations on each of these topics. I won't talk about all of them because most of them are still very much in the discussion stage within committees and don't have actual bills moving forward. I'll call out a couple that are counter to that. The school funding one at the top, Representative Neron has introduced a bill to rethink how the state defines current service level for school districts for the state school fund. That bill appears to be moving forward, and I believe Governor Kotek will be supporting that bill, so we'll continue to work with the representatives on that. Senator Dembro down towards the bottom, the TSPC moving to the Department of Education. That bill has an amendment, and I believe will be introduced later today. And so we'll see that discussion pick up, and we're all trying to learn more about exactly what those amendments mean and how to support that process if it happens. Okay, I'm also not going to go through all these bullets. I know Corey. But I do want to say this is helpful as you think about the governor's recommended budget and process. So it's one stage of the budget process. It clearly defines what the government wants the legislature to pay for the next 2 years and why. But it isn't our budget yet. It's the budget we will ask for the legislature, but after the end of the legislative session, ODE will actually get its legislatively adopted budget. That'll be the budget that we operate on. So as I talk about this, don't think of it as this is what we have, think of it as this is what we're asking for. It was a challenging budget to write. The governor was directly involved in the writing of the budget all the way through, and especially on the key priority areas, which were houselessness, mental health, and education. Most agencies did not have funding requests approved, so their POPs were not approved in most of the agencies across the state, and some of them even had some reductions because we have a lot of one-time federal money in the state right now, and we're seeing that money dry up and not be replaced by the federal government. The Department of Education was treated a little bit differently because it's one of those education priorities, as is early learning. The governor did look back to the work of the Racial Justice Council and incorporate those ideas, and did have some meetings with members of the Racial Justice Council to get more information about some of them along the way through the budget process, but that all happened very quickly because the governor didn't have a lot of time from election date to her inauguration date to putting out the budget. What we did see in investments is $120 million aimed at early literacy. So we are working closely, many of the leaders at OD are working closely with the governor's office on framing that policy. Summer enrichment through community-based organizations to support students in the summer, about $30 million. Early learning investments through DELC, the Department of Early Learning and Care, next school year. A state school fund budget that is larger than what was proposed by the Chief Financial Office. They were at 9.52. This is a $9.9 billion budget from the governor. The Educator Advancement Council, $10 million investment to continue their work on diversifying the educator workforce and supporting it. And then others you can see in here, that ethnic studies one again will increase some. And then I'll leave this slide for people to look at on their own, but what I'm naming here is that what community brought forward to the department and what the department put forward in its POPs were largely funded through the governor's budget process. The new things that were added were related to early learning, early literacy, and summer programming, which are all fantastic as well. So. Last week, we published an enrollment update for the state of Oregon, and we have very flat enrollment across the state. So we actually saw a slight decline of about 632 students statewide out of our over 550,000 students. What we are seeing is that our student body is continuing to diversify. So we have 41% of our students in Oregon are students of color. Again, only about 11 to 12% of our teachers are teachers of color. So it calls out the work of the Educator Advancement Council and how we all need to support that work. We also continue to have more students take advantage of the option to self-identify as non-binary on the gender identification. I'm hopeful that that can expand to more definitions in the future. There is a full fall membership report that is linked here, and within that, or did I put it on the, oh here, I put it on this page, an enrollment research brief that came out of the Office of Education, Innovation and Improvement. This report talks about what happened during the COVID and why there was a reduction in the number of students attending schools in Oregon. Talks about what may happen in the future. So the top line there is a link if you want to dig into that report. It calls out that the declines happened mostly among white students in Oregon and mostly among the lower grade levels. So that is a possible sign that we have more students that are in some private kindergarten programs and some private and some homeschool programs in those primary years, and that may mean that as students get older, they may re-enter the public school system as well. So we need to continue to watch for that and think about the kinds of supports those students will need when they do re-enter. Okay, my last topic. I wanted to share this with you all to share with your networks. There's a link in here to the posting. The search for the next director of the Oregon Department of Education is open. It is, again, a nationwide search. The application deadline right now is March 6th. And if you have ideas or networks of people that you'd like to get this information out to, I encourage you to share that so that the governor has a great pool of candidates to choose among. And that's it. Happy to answer questions if there's time. I may have taken too much time, sorry.
I think I'm going to be very bold just to use that, continue to use that word. We have plenty of time today.
Okay, you are the chairs.
So we are making time. I would like to invite folks to comment or ask questions. And I see one from Vice Chair Scurlock.
Thank you so much, Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata, and thank you so much, Cole Gill, for the detailed presentation. As usual, you do such an amazing job. I do have some questions around, there was so much meat in this presentation I'm scrolling through because this is really helpful. I was wondering if you could share, and I'm not sure if you can, a little bit more around, and I think you changed, I think the number was HB, and then you said, I think 3144, I think, maybe that one changed from, okay, around Pacific Islander, is that Native Hawaiian Student Success Plan?
Yes.
I'm curious around because this has been kind of a national kind of push, which has been great around making sure that Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian communities are not being set aside, that we are more intentional about learning about our Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian brothers and sisters. So I was curious about some of the conversations that have come up from and also with Governor Kotek around this particular House bill and maybe some of the reasons why this is being advocated for at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Scurlock, and happy to talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to be on camera. This bill, I think, it's critical. So one of the things I didn't explain here that I explained in committee yesterday is that when the Student Success Act passed, there were two groups that the department was working with on student success already. So there, for decades, the American Indian Alaska Native state plan existed, and there's been an advisory group in place. And that's a partnership that's a little bit different. It is somewhat about race and ethnicity. It's also about sovereignty of those nations. And that plan is developed in coordination and partnership with the 9 nations that are recognized here in Oregon. There is also, from 2016 to when the Student Success Act passed in 2019, already existing the African American Black Student Success Plan. And it also has an advisory group made up of people from the African American Black community in Oregon from all parts of the state geographically, and developed the plan, and has been, both of those were funded additionally through the Student Success Act to be able to have these grants that would go to community-based organizations and school districts and ESDs in partnership to better serve students, and to really think about how those students are sometimes not seen, not counted, not served in our public school system. And so to really break down some of those barriers through those grant processes, and then uplift the plan that was developed by community, informing the state school system of what needs to change in order to better support students. When the Student Success Act passed, it codified both of those, further funded them, and added the Latino, Latina, Latinx, and indigenous peoples of Central South America, Mesoamerica, and some islands. So we had those 3, and it did an important thing. So Section 25, I think, in the Student Success Act said that the Department of Education could identify other groups that the system is not serving well, and seek and create student success plans, and then also seek funding from the legislature to support those. So the first one that came was the LGBTQ2SIA+ group. So again, developed by community, informing the state of changes that needed to be made, and then having some funds delivered by the legislature to help support that work through CBOs and school districts. So this is now the fifth group, and what was shared by several of the students and community that offered testimony yesterday was that the need for this group came out strongly when the reporting system changed and separated Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians from the Asian group of students. So for a long time they were all captured together, and the disparities in services and outcomes were not seen in the same way. So that's one of the reasons why it became critically important to name this group as a group that the system is not serving well in terms of graduation outcomes, chronic absenteeism, discipline, and referrals to special services, those kinds of things. There are disparities for this group of students like there are for some other groups that I previously talked about. One thing that has come, I think, well, two things I want to say about these plans as they've been developed. It's become clear as we dig in with community around each of these plans that the system, the way that we collect data is still very limiting. So each of these communities of people is really made up of many, many, many different communities of individuals. And so capturing them under these even larger race ethnic terms that are often used here isn't capturing the diversity among that group of students in any one of the student success groups that we currently have. And many of the students are also do identify as either Black or Pacific Islander, and are also not always showing up in the data for those groups because of the other race ethnicity decisions that they're making when they identify on school registration time. And so part of this needs to be about making sure that we are seeing all of the students, and part of it needs to be about recognizing that not all African American and Black students are from the same community, have the exact same needs. So those things are being pointed out. And then the second part I would point out is that developing these student success plans for each of these groups is critically important. And we need to think much more deeply about how we get this important information that's developed by community, not just at the state level, but in the hands of school districts, so that they have it to inform their local decisions and how they all interact with one another, so that each of these groups are aware of what the other plans say and how we could strengthen the plans by coming together at certain times and sharing information with one another. I'm just going to keep going for a little bit, I'm sorry, Director Scurlock, but the other bill that ODE put forward, House Bill 2275, the grant consolidation work, one of the pieces there that Assistant Superintendent Nine spoke to yesterday in committee is that a change that we're making in the use of school district SIA funds, student investment account funds. So the significant amount of money that the districts get to both improve mental health and social emotional well-being and to improve academic disparities among student groups. Right now, when they develop their plans and they engage with community, they also have to consider what the quality education model puts forward as best practices. What we've added into that bill, and we hope that it moves forward and passes, is that school districts also need to review these student success plans and consider the best practices that are named by community within those plans as they develop their spending plan for the student investment account. So trying to get this more actionable at the school district level. So I hope that I answered I know I over-answered, but I hope I also did answer your specific question.
Thank you so much. This is so helpful. And I just want to honor just the work that's being done not only by our board, but also with ODE around uplifting voices of color. Strategically doing that, because what we found is that when it comes to our Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian communities, our students, they have traveled to certain places for vacations or things like that, but completely oblivious to the culture, to the language, to the traditions, because they're looking at certain groups through a, how do I want to say it? Through a tourist perspective. Mm-hmm. And we have unintentionally done great harm from that. And so I was just going to briefly say, Chris Young, who's at the University of Oregon, has been asked by Stanford University, because of student input, a student by the name of Ari Patu, to teach a course around Samoan language and culture. That's now, so he's a like professor in Turin or something like that. But part of the reason was because of the lack of education that was happening. It's not just our state, but across the nation around Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian culture, practices, things like that. And so I just can't express enough how much of an honor it is to listen to your report and know that our conversations are bringing about positive change. And so I just want to say thank you for that, and thank you for the presentation.
Other comments or questions for Director Gill? I'm going to piggyback on that before I lose my train of thought, because that happens quickly and these days for me. That was such a robust, one, the presentation, and then the explanation that you just provided. There is so much opportunity to take a lot of information away and dissect it and become better informed. As a board, I encourage us to really think about every single aspect of the explanation that you just gave us on the Student Success Act, and the application of SIA funds in the school districts, which is probably the most, I think, critical for us to keep an eye on and be aware of. I am privileged to be participating in a class at Portland State University on critical methodologies. And we had a presenter, a professor from Portland State University, who did a presentation on racial statistics and the use of statistics. Her research project specifically addresses the needs, really the collection of statistical data of the Asian Pacific Islander communities. And the amount of information that is gleaned from that report is tremendous. And so I am very happy to see, one, to hear Vice Chair Scurlock's echoing of the importance of keeping in mind that this is not a homogeneous perspective, it's not a homogeneous group, and that we owe that minutious detail to that particular group, to every ethnic, cultural, and racial group. But it brought so much additional awareness for me on what to be looking for, particularly in this kind of work that we are doing, the implications of the work that we are doing. Thank you, Vice Chair Scurlock, for also pointing out how narrow the perspective has been that we have utilized at every level, from the ground all the way up, in doing elaborating work that we have developed to serve these communities. So I think it's so important to take into consideration, not just that it's been a tourist perspective, it's been a missionary perspective. It's been even sometimes a service perspective, the Peace Corps included, and it's a very limited perspective. It doesn't provide the outlook that we need to have when we are determining the services that not just the Asian Pacific Islander group requires, but every single one of the ethnic groups that is called out, or the cultural groups that is called out in the Student Success Act. So that's one thing. Thank you. And also just brief comment on how all of those things, folks, pay attention. Let's pay attention and keep our finger on the pulse of all of the items that are currently in legislature. All of those things. I'm just looking at the list, Colt, and wanted to ask more about every single one of those items because they're so critical. I'm very happy to see that there is commitment to the expansion of the ethnic studies work that needs to occur in the department and in the preparation of educators out in the workforce. There's so many other things. One question that I did have is about, can we, I don't know if you can put never mind, I won't ask us to put the slides back up. But you did mention that the position for the director and deputy superintendent is now open. And that there has been a profile that has been developed for the needs of this position specific to the state of Oregon. How was that profile determined? Who contributed? It's especially important that considering something that you named in your report, the change in the demographic of our student population, that we have critical input from every community and demographic in the state of Oregon. How was that profile developed? Did it come from the governor's office?
Yeah, so thanks, Chair Martinez-Zapata. The profile was developed by the governor's office and staff, built off of, I think, the governor's specific desires for the position, but also off the existing position description of, and what's in statute around the duties of this office. But I do understand that the governor's staff, at the governor's direction, is going to reach out to community, to both traditional partners and community partners that are less than traditional in some administrations anyway, to refine that before they make their final selection. So there is going to be more outreach. Right now, they're very much focused on engagement and outreach around the early literacy effort because it's moving first through the legislature, and then they'll transition and do some more outreach related to the profile and skill sets and hopes that people have for the person in this position.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to continue on my trend of being bold, right? Being bold today, being bold in our priorities as a board. The role of the board is critical in advising the governor's office, legislator, the state ODE, on the work that ODE does and then serves the state. In my perfect world, it's a silver platter that we serve to the state. And part of that silver platter includes having some input on who our deputy superintendent is. And so I would call on the governor's office to consult with the board to see what that profile, and I hope that it is not too late.
No, I don't think so.
Because I think that the voice of this board is important and crucial in taking that position or moving that position forward.
Yeah.
I have my own opinions about even having the position open, but I'll reserve those for another time.
We'll definitely work with you and with the
Yes.
staff.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Chair.
Yes. Yes, School Board Advisor Gomez.
Thank you, Chair Martinez. So, it's not necessarily a question, but Director Gill, thank you for that report. And what stuck out to me was during the enrollment update, you mentioning over 40% of Oregon's population is underserved minority people of color communities. And I guess I'd like to mention my demographic of the school district that I serve here on Eastern Oregon, Hermiston. Our school district is made up over 50% of students of color, predominantly Latino students. And it is alarming the ratio of teachers of color to our students of color here in our district. So that, to me, would be something I would love to see ODE and all these boards and organizations kind of put in efforts to increase the number of teachers. I mean, if, these are issues we see out in metropolitan areas, I don't know if you all can imagine how it is in a rural east side of the state. And another point to that too is myself being as a board member, I am the only person of color on my board. And we are the Hermiston, we're the largest school district in Eastern Oregon. And even my journey to being appointed to the board was interesting and challenging. And I don't know how the election season will be this time around, but as I mentioned, I will be throwing my name again. And because I know that it is important, the voice of a person of color on that board in a school district that serves a student population that is over 50% students of color. And I just encourage you all, I mentioned earlier in my report that election season is coming up, and that process has opened up. The deadline, I believe, is March 15th or around that date, so I would encourage you all to just reach out to folks that you think would be good board members, but specifically board members of people of color. I know that the Oregon School Board Members of Color Caucus also is working on efforts to recruit and work with candidates, and I think it's just what Chair Martinez Zapata mentioned. It's crucial, and boards and board members play such a big role and impact school district, and so I think that's something that we can't lose sight of and think of how can we encourage candidates or folks, because me being newly on this board, I knew that there were so many barriers, but now experiencing being on the board, there are many barriers as to one, when you would serve, but further than that, a person of color. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but again, I just encourage you all to, encourage folks, meet with folks, have conversations, and just remind folks that, being a board member or a leader doesn't have to look a specific way. I'm not retired, I don't own my own business, it doesn't, board members don't have to be like that, which predominantly in my area is usually what we see as board members. And so I think bringing that change has inspired a lot of folks, a lot of parents, a lot of young families that perhaps don't even have children in school yet, but are trying to build that future for our communities. So I just wanted to kind of mention that part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Board Advisor Gomez, I'm thinking about everything that you're sharing and the shift in the demographic. Yes, when I visited my favorite educator in the world's classroom, I asked, is this what every school in the district looks like? And she said yes. And the teachers, no. And not only are the teachers not there, and I do want to acknowledge that the demographic is what do you call that curve, right? It's a growing and expanding curve, or vice versa, right? We have a huge young demographic of kids of color, Latino, bilingual, non-English speaking students, and the adult population is smaller. That acknowledging that, and still so important to acknowledge that education cannot be the same thing that we have been accustomed to. It simply cannot. For us to serve this demographic, we cannot do education in the same way that we have done it in the past. It is important, it is imperative to get the EAC, to get financial, monetary support from the governor's office, from the legislature, from any place that we can, to support the expansion of administrators of color, of certainly the teacher workforce, to change. And so this all ties so well together with our former kindergarten assessment, our new family engagement for kindergartners. That is the type of transformation that we need to continue to do, and it doesn't stop there. I want to call that back. We're not done. We're not done with that piece of work. It is just the beginning of that piece of work, and the type of work that we need to continue to do as an agency. So thank you, School Board Advisor Gomez and Colt for sharing that. Anything else? Any other questions or comments that we have for Director Gill? Okay, well, it was a very robust conversation. Thank you. I appreciate for all of the information that you bring and share with us. This one was a wonderful one. I think very motivating considering it's legislative season. Alrighty, well then we will now move ahead to, unless I need to stop, I don't need to stop, correct? No. So we will move on to first readings, and we have the Farm to School Education Grant Administration Update, OAR 581017-044. Did I say all the fours? 0444. And we have, I believe, Dustin Mellon from Child Nutrition here to do the presentation. Corey, is there anybody else that I missed?
I believe it's just
Dustin?
Just Dustin.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dustin.
Yeah, thank you. Chair Martinez Zapata, Vice Chair Skurlock, Second Vice Chair Wheeler, members of the board. My name is Dustin Melton. I'm the Director of Child Nutrition Programs, People Transportation, and the Fingerprinting Unit with the Oregon Department of Education. And it took me about 4 years to finally be able to get that out straight. I'm going to be presenting on a technical rule fix to our Farm to School Education grant. And I see Corey's pulling up the slides. I don't know if right now. It'll be okay, Corey. It's just a visual. So I'll just give you a little background on our intentions here, and then open up to any questions that you might have. The purpose of the Competitive Oregon Farm to School Education Grant is to assist entities in paying the costs they incur to providing food-based, agricultural-based, or garden-based educational activities for the benefit of children enrolled in a public school or public charter school within a school district or a center-based program for children. We had a technical rule fix was requested by several other stakeholders in our partner organizations. Just for some context, our education grant is about $3 million, and we provided that to 48 grantees this most recent biennium. You can go ahead to the next slide, Corey. Thank you. So our technical rule fix will be to remove the following language from our farm to school rule set, which is the department will award competitive Oregon Farm to School program education grants for the biennium beginning on July 1st of the first year of the biennium and then ending on June 30th on the second year of the biennium. The funding is available Additional competitive grants will be awarded in subsequent biennia. So our technical rule fix will be to remove this language from the rule. And essentially what we're trying to do is provide grace for grantees that for reasons outside of their control, they were not able to submit a grant. And we are looking at what this will impact for this year. We finally got these education grants out, so they have about 6 months to do which effectively is supposed to be within 2 years' time. So we put together this technical rule fix to allow some grace for things that are beyond their control. I don't anticipate that this will be a need, but it does give us that space to provide that additional time for those grantees. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you so much, Director Melton. And do we have any questions on the updates for the Farm to School Education Grant Administration? I love it when there are no questions.
I like that
To
too.
me, it's just the perfect presentation. I honestly take it that way.
I'll take it that way.
Thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have any questions or comments. I very much appreciate the work and the presentation,
Yeah,
Director
you're welcome.
Melton.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, and so our next item then is the instructional materials list update, the new edition of Amplify Education's Core Knowledge Language Arts, or CKLA. And our presenters are virtual this morning. Ajali Moore from the Office of Teaching, Learning and Assessment, Tina Roberts from the Office of Teaching, Learning and Assessment, and we also have with us Director Alexa Pearson from the Office of Teaching, Learning and Assessment.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Martina Zapata, Vice Chair Scurlock, and Second Vice Chair Wheeler. My name is Alexa Pearson. I'm the Director of Standards and Instructional Support in the Office of Teaching, Learning and Assessment. And we are here today to do a first read. I'm joined by Ajali Moore and Tina Roberts. We're here to do a first read on a request to shift one of our approved curriculums. The publisher, Amplify Education, has asked us to substitute some updated materials. So Ajali is going to give you the OAR part of it, and then Tina's going to talk about her review, and then we're here at the end to answer any questions you might have. So I'll turn it over to Ajali.
Thank you, Alexa. Hello, Chair Martina Zapata, Vice Chair Scurlock, Second Vice Chair Wheeler, members of the board. For the record, my name is Ajali Moore, and I am Oregon Department of Education's Instructional Materials Coordinator. On the screen, you will see, in one moment, the Oregon Administrative Rule language that gives the State Board the authority to review and approve substitution requests. And the intention of this rule is to allow the board to approve updated versions of materials that have already been adopted by the board. So materials we've already reviewed and gone through our robust process for. And this helps our agency and the board increase the options that are available to districts who procure materials outside of the typical state adoption year. So if they're off cycle or they're needing to procure additional materials for their local vision. ODE is on a 7-year content area-based adoption schedule that is set by the State Board of Education. And in 2021, ODE and the board approved materials for English language arts. The State Board of Education adopted Amplify Education's Core Knowledge Language Arts, or CKLA, as a recommended instructional material for ELA in October of 2021. In 2022, an updated edition of CKLA was published, which includes additional research units, and Tina will talk about those in the next slide. So if the update is approved, the 2022 edition of CKLA would be added to the list of approved instructional materials for ELA through the end of the current contract period. The publisher has agreed to supply the new edition of CKLA at the contract price of the originally adopted edition, unless the 22 edition is lower than the 2021 contract price. If approved by the board, districts will be allowed to purchase the updated edition of CKLA for a stable contract price guaranteed through January of 2028 without conducting a formal independent adoption, which can be kind of a heavy lift for some districts. Additionally, districts who have already purchased the approved version of the program will be provided the updated materials at no cost, which Tina will also talk about in the next slide. Northwest Textbook Depository was engaged to confirm that the update is appropriate and will not negatively affect any districts using the current program. I'm now going to pass the mic over to Tina Roberts, ODE's ELA Education Specialist, to share more about the content related to the update.
Thank you, Ajali. Good morning, Chair Martina Zapata, Vice Chair Scurlock, Second Vice Chair Wheeler, and members of the board. My name is Tina Roberts. I'm the Language Arts Education Specialist at the Oregon Department of Education. I had the opportunity to review this update submitted by Amplify for their online CKLA program. According to their update request, Amplify has created additional resources in the form of research units within their CKLA curriculum to address requests for further diversity in the program. Amplify recommends that these units be implemented at the end of the year due to the pedagogical synthesis and the application of skills inherent in the research and inquiry process, and the writing or multimodal culminating tasks that are expected across grades K through 5. However, the units can also be implemented for extended core instruction during flex periods, for district designated pausing points, or for enrichment periods. Rudine Sims Bishop, Professor Emerita at Ohio State University, is the author of the essay that brought us the idea of mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. According to Dr. Bishop's work, students need mirrors, or ways to see themselves in the text that they're asked to engage in. They need windows, or ways to see how others experience the world. And they need sliding glass doors, or ways to be able to step into another's culture or life experience and get a small taste of what the world is like from someone else's perspective. Dr. Bishop's work was a cornerstone of the equity-focused criteria that was developed for the ELA instructional materials adoption process. Amplify's updated materials are diverse, and they provide students with windows and mirrors as they build knowledge through a lens of multiple perspectives. The updated materials consist of research units which incorporate culturally relevant topics and instruction and lean into the good work of Dr. Sims Bishop. So for example, grade 3 students will learn about the vibrant music and poetry and culture of the Jazz Age in the United States. They'll learn about famous writers and musicians like Langston Hughes, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Melba Liston, Tito Puente, and Miles Davis. And in the Adventure Stories unit, grade 1 students will study the careers of real-world explorers, Dr. Eugenie Clark, who's commonly known as the Shark Lady for her study of sharks and of fish in the order of Tetraodontiforms, and American mountain climber Sophia Dannenberg, who's best known as the first African American and the first Black woman to summit Mount Everest. So during the study of these amazing women, students will think critically about how teamwork and collaboration can make greater adventures possible. After a review of these units, I recommend accepting Amplify substitution request. It's important to note that this submission will not decrease the score Amplify received on any IMET metrics for either the grade band K2 or 3 through 5. And again, it will be provided at no cost to districts who already have purchased these instructional materials. I'll pass things back to Ajali now.
Thank you, Tina. That was fantastic. We will be back next month to recommend adoption of Amplify substitution request. We are now open to any questions that the board may have at this time.
Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Vice Chair Scurlock.
Thank you so much to our awesome chair, and then also to, I want to make sure I say your names correctly, Ajali Moore, Tina Roberts, and Alexa Pearson. I have to say, as I was listening to the presentation, I was hoping that I could be a K-5 student for a little bit, because There's something so powerful about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, as you mentioned, by Dr. Bishop's work. And I also wanted just to commend the specifics that were referenced to as far as like the Jazz Age or the Real World Explorers, that the curriculum is being intentional about educating our students when it comes to what we would call racial social justice, but the importance of highlighting diverse heroes and things of that order. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And then also just to say, even with the terminology of mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, that's teaching K-5 students to make connections to what they'll learn at college level ethnic studies or college level AP English language and composition. Some of the same terms, language as far as in discussion, is beautiful. I was really kind of taken aback that the language was being the same, which I love to see happening in the classroom for our K-5 students. So thank you so much. I'd love to read the textbook myself. So hopefully that will happen soon. But thank you so much. And thank you so much, Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata.
Yes, Teacher Advisor Khalil.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata, and thank you for this great work that your department is doing. I worked with CKLA in the past and really, and Amplify, but we did notice that, was missing some of those components. So I'm really excited to hear that you made those additions, and it is the science of reading and how this program really goes hand in hand with that and supports it. So I'm hoping our district is up for adoption in the next couple of years for ELA, and I'm hoping to be a part of that committee, and hopefully we look at this program and decide to use it. But thank you.
Other comments or questions? Okay, well, I'm just going to insert my comments on here because this is exactly, it's a prime example of looking at that super high level approach that will trickle down. In this case, it is an effective trickle down. It's not like other trickle down theories we've heard about in the past. But this one actually effectively is trickling down, will trickle down to the classroom and have an impact on kids. So I came prepared with a question, and I thought, I hope this isn't one of these stump the chump kind of things I used to, in my classroom, invite the students to stump the chump, right? I'll be the chump if you can stump me. And often they did. And I thought, I hope I don't bring this question, and it actually, there may not be that much detail available in the report. Well, guess what? You stumped me because the examples that you brought were the questions that I was going to ask. I wanted to hear some clear examples of these changes and not suggestions of a performative nature that might just talk about diversity. We don't see it. Our children are going to be seeing these examples, and I really appreciate that consideration, that level of consideration in the work, again, that the agency, that the Department of Education is doing to make sure that it translates to children in the classroom. So much appreciated. I love the progress that we are making, if I haven't said that enough. Yes, student advisor, Emily.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata. I just sort of wanted to echo what you were saying. I think the specific examples were really great to hear, and I agree with Vice Chair Scurlock that I kind of wish I could go back to elementary school and learn from this. But I think I talked about this in one of my earlier reports, I don't remember which month, but the idea of celebrating people of color and their joy and not only teaching them in context of oppression, I think is extremely important, especially to start from a young age, and to show students that not only are their stories of oppression or tragedy important, but also the stories of accomplishment and joy. And I think that the examples you gave very perfectly fit into that. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you and sort of insert that comment.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that feedback. Any other comments or questions? Questions are valid too. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions or comments. We really appreciate the presentation and the report on the update on the instructional materials. And thank you, Ajali, thank you, Tina, and thank you, Director Alexa Pearson, for being here. Okay, so I think what we are going to do is we only have one informational report reserved for after the lunch hour. So I think what we will do is move that report. I believe our presenter is here in the room. So we will move that report up so that we can actually adjourn the meeting earlier. However, can I ask for a 5-minute bio break so that we can have a bio break? So just 5 minutes, and we will return and continue with our informational report, and then we can adjourn right before lunch. Yes? Okay, thank you. 5-minute break.
Sean.
So welcome back from our short break, everyone. And we will now hold our last item on the agenda, which is an informational report on online and remote learning guidance. And we have some people in the Zoom room, and we also have Ken Greenbaum from the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment here. Also in the Zoom room are Allie Ivy, I believe, is in the Zoom room, from the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, and Kate Pattison from the Office of the Director. Is Kate in the room, or is it Jennifer? That's
Chair, I believe both of them are
Okay.
not going to be able to join right now, but we do have Director Greenbaum as well as Assistant Superintendent Jennifer Patterson.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, well, please.
Thank you. Chair Martinez Zapata, Vice Chair Skurlock, Second Vice Chair Wheeler, members of the board, advisors. My name is Ken Greenbaum. I'm the Director of Digital Learning and Well-Rounded Access at ODE. And as we mentioned, my colleagues, Kate Pattison, our charter school specialist, and Allie Ivy, our digital learning program specialist, are ill today and at home, hence the change in or slight change in the agenda attendance. So thank you for that, Grace. I'm here today to share the online and remote learning guidance the department published in August as a continuation of the work we started in mid-2021 and last shared with you in December of 2021. We originally set out to establish program quality standards for online and remote learning to ensure students in Oregon are receiving equitable quality education options with the continued expansion of online and remote options following the COVID-19 pandemic. Our team conducted multiple rounds of engagement, evaluated current standards, and established the Remote Learning Advisory Committee. By June 2022, we decided to pivot and create this guidance as opposed to new standards. Good, next slide, please. The last time we spoke to the board, we shared some context for the online and remote learning work happening at the department. As there are several new board members, we want to spend some time setting the stage, providing context for the guidance, and creating shared language amongst the group. When we say online and remote learning, we're referring to schools and programs where the student and the teacher are not in the same physical location for more than half of the student's instructional time. This includes online schools and programs that are full virtual and focused virtual, virtual public charter schools, and district-operated virtual schools. These are fairly easy to picture. However, we included the term remote to include those non-virtual home-based programs where students and teachers are working at a distance but not always using virtual tools to facilitate learning. We also choose not to use language the department relied on heavily during the pandemic response to make the distinction that this is non-emergency guidance. Next slide. I'm going to share some data to give context and rationale for the work we were speaking to today. I'll move pretty quickly through the data to honor our time on the agenda, but there are more data and details in your dockets in the data snapshot report. Also, before doing so, we want to acknowledge that the qualitative data, the stories of students, families, and educators also inform this work. I'll speak to where you can find more about that in a moment. So we'll speak to some quantitative data, but there were also quite a few areas where we know that story is important as well. With that, these quantitative data are based on full and focused virtual schools. These are schools that are either fully online or online a majority of the time. This slide shows growth in enrollment over time. Green represents district-operated schools, and blue represents virtual public charter schools. While full-time enrollment is largely in virtual public charter schools, much of the growth has been in district-operated virtual schools. Also, just yesterday, we received data for the 22-23 school year, which unfortunately didn't make it into the slides, but important to note, it shows a downward trend in enrollment to about 20,600 students. These data show the growth in actual number of schools. Again, green representing district-operated schools, the group that has seen the most growth in recent years, from 13 to 36 schools since 2017. The big takeaway from these first two slides is that most virtual school enrollment is in virtual public charter schools, but most growth has been in district virtual schools. Disparities in enrollment are important equity considerations. Here you can see that the students who are accessing virtual schools are not reflective of the statewide demographics. Standout differences include the first row, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx students with 11% lower enrollment in online options as one would expect from statewide enrollment. Additionally, virtual schools serve 12% fewer ever English learners and almost 3% fewer students receiving education services under IDEA relative to their statewide enrollment. This chart shows the distribution of four-year graduation rate by virtual school. So blue shows the range of all schools statewide, including brick and mortar and virtual schools, with each dot representing a single school's graduation rate. The green represents the online schools, both district operated and virtual charter schools. We think it's important to represent data in this way to show the range of student outcomes, both promising and concerning, based on graduation rate across instructional models. And finally, coming to the end of our quantitative data here. Here are the 2021 four-year graduation rates by race ethnicity with virtual schools compared to all schools statewide. Every student group is, on average, graduating at lower rates in virtual schools as compared to statewide trends. We know that there is nuance and complexity to data like graduation rate, and that no one number tells the story of a school or a student. But these data are important starting points for discussion about equitable opportunities and outcomes for students. I understand that was a very quick overview of the data, but we hope they lay some of the groundwork and context and foundation for some of the work I'm going to speak to now. So as a result of the landscape of online remote learning we just touched upon, as well as our engagement efforts, which you can read more about in our engagement report, which should be in your dockets. In August 2022, we published the department's first ever non-emergency online and remote learning guidance. Through a year-long community engagement process and support from the Remote Learning Advisory Committee, the department identified the essential elements of designing equitable, relational, and inclusive online and remote schools and programs that are in compliance with existing rules, policies, and requirements. These are essential elements these essential elements are the policies and ideas that school leaders and operators should be most attuned to when planning to open or currently operating an online school or program. The purpose of the guidance is twofold. First, to provide clarity regarding existing federal and state requirements and policies for online and remote schools. And second, to share design indicators and provide tools for school and district operators and leaders to use in planning for continuous improvement and innovation. This guidance does not, however, introduce any new rule or statute, nor is it a replacement for Division 22 assurances or requirements written into charter school law. Further, we can go back a slide. It's all right. Further, the guidance does not include an exhaustive list of all policies that pertain to online and remote schools. Rather, it uplifts those policies that are most important to tend to in online and remote schools, given their unique program model. The guidance in its current iteration was designed to be implemented during the 22-23 school year, as we'll spend this year getting feedback on the guidance in order to revise prior to releasing a more permanent version in the summer of 2023. At this point in time, ODE will not monitor compliance with this guidance. So the guidance sets out to answer the question, what are the minimum critical requirements and policies for online and remote schools and programs? The guidance is organized on the basis of the following structure, starting with pillars that center student experience and instructional quality, and our general categories of design. Lead and design for equity, create relational conditions for learning, and plan and implement inclusive instruction. Design indicators within each pillar that elevate critical elements of online and remote school design. Questions for design and continuous improvement for each of those design indicators to assist online and remote school operators and leaders in designing, evaluating for compliance, and considering areas for improvement. And lastly, focus requirements and policies associated with each of those design indicators, which are the most important laws and rules to tend to when designing and operating online schools in Oregon. When looking at the guidance, again, it should be linked in your dockets. You will notice that the majority of the document is actually organized as a tool for schools and districts to use to reflect on their compliance with focus requirements and policies. This tool, which we refer to as the Compliance Evaluation and Planning Form, organizes the elements of the guidance by pillar, design indicator, and so on, into a format to facilitate planning and usability. This form will help school and program leaders in determining whether or not they are compliant with focus requirements and policies, as well as determining evidence needed and next steps for continuous improvement. The department has committed to this work with the Remote Learning Advisory Committee for 2 years and will reevaluate our plan moving forward later this spring. In the meantime, we will republish the guidance for the 23-24 school year and beyond this summer, incorporating any revisions or improvements based on what we have learned throughout this year. Our goal for the new guidance is to include rubrics and tools that focus on quality and move beyond just compliance. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments? Yes, Student Advisor Caroline.
Thank you, Chair Martina Zapata, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. One question I had was with the creation of like the more permanent form of the compliance. In addition to having school leaders be involved in evaluating the standards and in evaluating their own compliance with it, is there any like student engagement or outreach with students in virtual schools to kind of evaluate what they feel would be most conducive to their success in that environment?
Chair Martina Zapata, Advisor Gal, thank you for the wonderful question. So the involvement of student participation and evaluation in school design kind of remains within existing monitoring mechanisms, be it for charter schools or Division 22 or any other forms of evaluation at the various local levels. That being said, the guidance does have in place some recommendations or points to including community and students in the school and in the continuous improvement process. We were able to do some virtual school visits when thinking about some of the early standards work before we kind of evolved into the kind of guidance work. And so that's something we continue to want to ensure, frankly, is increased as we think about those tools and resources. But a lot of the student voice and input in terms of school evaluation at that level remains at and is frankly encouraged, but remains at the school and district level.
Any other questions or comments for Director Greenbaum? Yes, Vice Chair Scurlock.
Thank you so much, Chair Guadalupe Martinez Zapata. Thank you so much for your presentation today. I do have a question in connection to, and this may be addressed in the report, around student performance or and attendance as far as some of the concerns I know in school, high school level. Attendance is often an indicator of how a student will perform in class. Having direct contact with the teacher and needing outside support and all those kind of things. I was curious, how are those things addressed online? And is there a process in place, or how does that work versus in comparison to maybe in-person instruction and supports in that way? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Martinez Zapata, Vice Chair Scurlock. Great question. Attendance is certainly something through engagement, our continuing work, that we hear and discuss a lot. Current policy within our attendance manual and set of policies does speak specifically to attendance. Currently, there's a daily attendance requirement, speaks to what substantial interaction looks like. There's various details outlined in current policies specifically for online and remote instruction, and the guidance kind of speaks to that and highlights that as a critical area to tend to. So that is specifically referenced in the guidance. I will say in the work moving forward as we engage, that comes up a lot in terms of the benefits and challenges of what attendance looks like in an online environment, and touches upon lots of different elements of school design and student experience. That is one of our subcommittees on the Remote Learning Advisory Committee right now, looking at attendance policy. Again, we have currently no plans to change or bring forth any change to that, but we are looking at developing some policy concepts, or at least exploring and hearing from those in our committee what is working, what is not, and what does that mean for online remote learning attendance moving forward, as it pertains to it being both meaningful, it being additive to school operation and design, and issues like accountability, funding, and so on. So it is, current policy is highlighted in the guidance with some the ways that those are the same or different for online programs in schools, and it's a current part of our work that we're exploring.
Thank you. And I have one more question. When, let's say if a student, does well, passes the classes, or if they don't do well and maybe they struggle and either drop out of the program or something like that, do you have any data or exit, I guess, information, maybe as far as from a student's perspective, what worked and what did not work, and the impact it had on their success in the online program?
Chair Martinez-Zapata, Vice Chair Scurlock, great question. We don't have that level of detail yet or now, and we wanted to first kind of get an understanding of who is attending online remote schools, right? What is the landscape? But those are the exact questions we're continuing to explore, both from a quantitative perspective to the degree we can with the current data we have at the state level, and also potentially through, as we alluded to, information on qualitative and storytelling, because that's a critical part of the story. So no, we don't have that current data, and we hope that that is a part of our future work.
Thank you so much.
I think it is the practice of many districts to do that kind of qualitative data with students in the brick and mortar, correct? If I'm not mistaken, I'm not necessarily asking you the question, but just sort of saying it out loud to piggyback on what Vice Chair Scurlock is suggesting we need to have information on. And also, from my perspective, a question about the qualitative data that follows the quantitative that we have available to us right now. So on slide 5, the landscape of the learning, online and remote learning disparities in enrollment that shows the historically marginalized groups and the lower engagement from those groups in online and remote. I imagine we don't yet have any of those stories that inform why students from these demographic backgrounds don't participate. Is that an accurate assumption?
Chair Martinez-Zapata, yes, we have work to do in that area, frankly.
Yeah.
I can speak to that story a little bit. Mm-hmm. When we first set out to perhaps explore new standards, our intent was to engage students and families more than we have, and we certainly did so in some of our virtual school visits. As we pivoted towards and recognized the need for just getting clear on what current policy is, we wanted to be genuine in how and when we're asking for feedback, so we weren't creating new policy. That being said, to the degree those stories and that information does happen at the school level, we do not have that yet at the state level. In the guidance, what we have tried to elevate is the importance of that, the importance of, for example, family orientation and outreach, building relationship, ensuring students have a well-rounded education, and to encourage understanding why these enrollment disparities might exist. And so, do we have those stories? No. In the guidance, we have tried to elevate the importance of those connections with families and students, so that they are seen, heard, their identities are valued, both in the access or participation in the programs, and so for operators and school leaders and educators of online schools and programs to do those things. And so that's where we are at this point, I think, with regard to that.
Thank you so much. And I think it's really important for us to keep that as present as we continue to expand our work and create standards and rules in this regard. I can't help but think about the Caroline's student advisor Caroline's comment during the comment period, and the connection that there might be remote and indirect to the disadvantage that is created for historically marginalized students when we are talking about technology. She mentioned artificial intelligence as one aspect that might disadvantage. I think this is another that, again, whether remotely and indirectly connected to the advantages that students of color, that BIPOC students or historically disenfranchised students face, is going to be something that we really need to be paying attention to. How can we utilize the rules, standards, regulations that we produce, and the information that we get to inform those standards and rules to create a broader landscape and an advantage for those historically disadvantaged students. So thank you so much for the information that you've shared and for all of the opportunity yet that we have to continue to engage. Any other questions before we say goodbye to Director Greenbaum? It doesn't look like we have anything else, so thank you so much for sharing your report this morning still. Yes, it is still this morning. Okay, well, we have come to the record time, you all. I feel so accomplished today. With this, we have reached the end of today's agenda. Thank you all for your participation. The State Board will return again then on March 16th for our next meeting. And we are adjourned.
Shauna,